Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November meeting of the Cleveland C# VB.NET user group. A little bit about the group. We meet every month. Meetings are free of charge and open to the public, and we cover a variety of topics related to .NET. You can find meeting information posted at meetup.com at the link listed below. Also like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, PostSharp and DevExpress, for sponsoring the post-meeting prizes that will be given away using the evaluation forms. Also like to thank the .NET Foundation for sponsoring the meetup space, and NIS Technologies for sponsoring the recording and the web hosting. Also like to thank Manning.com for providing a special offer of 35% off a selection of books. You can use the discount code MTPCLEC21, and the link listed at the bottom of the slide will be provided in the chat window in just a little bit. Some general information. Please keep in mind, participation is highly encouraged. Granted, we're still running virtual, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions or jump in with comments. And keep in mind, the only stupid question is the one not being asked. However, when not speaking, kindly ask you to mute your microphones just to avoid any background noise. And as always, we like to keep it casual but organized, so jump in with comments and questions. But at the same time, we want to give enough time for our speaker to go through all the material and all the demos. Lastly, this presentation will be recorded and posted on YouTube. And per Jeff's request, we will post this after the .NET Conf is over. So for tonight's feature presentation, it is what's new in .NET 7, and it's going to be done by Jeff Frtiz from Microsoft. Jeff is the principal program manager for the .NET and Visual Studio teams at Microsoft. He writes workshops, presentations, and content for big events at Microsoft, such as Build, Ignite, and of course, .NET Conf that's coming up next week, and the MVP Summit. He is the managing partner and founder of the Live Coders stream team on Twitch, and he writes code and hosts a live video program 4 days a week. Something tells me you're a lot more active than just 4 days a week, Jeff.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, very true. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff, and I will make you presenter.
All right. As Sam pointed out, my name is Jeff Frtiz. I'm a principal product manager on the .NET and Visual Studio community teams. So I'm responsible for a lot of the live video content you see. I'm responsible for coordinating a bunch of the Learn content that you see, the Learn modules. I take care of putting together workshops for Blazor, .NET, and some other technologies. I'm also the executive producer of .NET Conf. Very excited about that event coming up next week. We've been planning it for the last 4 months. I want to make sure that you know that it's coming, and that's where we're going to launch .NET 7. The story so far, how did we get here? So, of course, we've got this history of .NET releases that we've been doing, and we set up back with .NET Core 3.0, and we said, we're going to release these every November going forward. So in November 2019, we released .NET Core 3.1. We renamed it to .NET 5 in 2020, .NET 6 in 2021. This year is .NET 7. Next year, .NET 8, and so on and so forth. That's the cadence that we've established. That's the order that we're going forward. Every other year, we have a long-term support version. So this past year with .NET 6, the most recent version of .NET that was released, it's going to be supported for 3 years up through November 2024. .NET 7, coming out next week, is going to be delivered with what we're now calling a short-term support, or STS, release cycle. That comes with support for 18 months. So that will be supported through July 2024. The idea here is if you want to be aggressive and pick up the latest release, you're going to get support for that through the next release, the LTS release, when that comes out. And the LTS release, you'll have support with that through at least the next LTS version that is released. And you'll have a year to convert and get over to that next version. So we believe that this is a adequate support cycle where we don't get stuck in these 5 to 10 year delivery and support cycles like we have with .NET Framework, where it's really nice. You don't have to upgrade from .NET Framework 4.6 or even 3.5 because it's still available. It's still shipping with Windows, and it's still supported for another 5 to 10 years. So by doing this, we're keeping folks current, we're keeping things moving, we're keeping things supportable. See a couple messages in chat. The name of the YouTube channel that this will be in. Yeah, there we go. And the video information. Fantastic. So, let's start talking about, of course, I mentioned .NET Conf. Next week, all the features that I'm talking about today, there's in-depth sessions that you're going to find as part of .NET Conf. If you're watching the recording of this, go over to youtube.com/.net. Look for the .NET Conf 2022 playlist. There's plenty of videos there. There's going to be more than 80 videos for you. All the content about .NET 7 and all the cool things you can do with .NET 6 as well. So we've got a bunch of pillars, several pillars that are part of this .NET 7 release. And the first of them is we want you to be able to do more with less code using C#11. In C#10, we started getting rid of some of that ceremony that we had in our code, getting rid of namespace as a block level statement, making it a file level statement, getting rid of using statements by making implicit usings in our applications, global using statements. Now we're introducing 5 major features to C# that I think are important for us as we want to write less code. The first is this required keyword here. So by adding the keyword required into our properties, you won't be able to create an object without fulfilling that property as it's being initialized. So I can't create, in this case, a new person object without specifying a last name. It's going to throw an error. There's generic math. We'll take a look at that in a minute. I've got some demos for you there. We've also introduced list patterns, so you can do pattern matching on a collection of objects and inspect that collection. And the last item that I'm a little bit shocked that folks are so excited about is something called raw string literals. So the sample that I have here on screen, and I'll go a little bit further into this in the demo code that I have. When you're using just normal strings and you want to put a quote inside of that string, we had to put a backslash in there, right? Escape, ignore this quote. With raw string literals, we start with 3 quotes, and then you can use your single quotes inside of the block, and it ignores them. It doesn't look at those as the terminator at the end of the string or some kind of an indicator that something else is going on. It ignores them entirely. You can put quotes in content, more quotes, by just adding more and closing quotes. So I can go to 4 quotes across, and then if I use 3 quotes, it'll escape and I'll only end up with 1 quote inside of it. So the mode that you're seeing with this concept of raw string literals is I can count and specify, well, here's how many characters I need in order to indicate what is what should be escaped and turned back into a quote. So by using 4 out here, it turns into 3 over here, becomes a single quote. So if you need double quotes to appear somewhere, you can have that appear easily as well. So let me show you a little bit of a demo. Let's go through and look at some code that will show you and talk about some of these updates that are coming as part of C#11. Now, I have a few Visual Studios running here. Let me go to this one, and let's start up here. I want to talk a little bit to start about generic math. Generic math is a way for us to take those math capabilities that were tightly coupled to the numeric primitives, single, double, float, integer, long, and allow you to apply them to other types. So we end up with a series of different interfaces out there that we can use that give those same mathematical interactions. So here I have the iParsable interface. that allows me to parse and turn something into another type, right? So I'm going to say parse and turn this into a GUID, and it gives me when I implement, right? I'm going to iParsable of a GUID because I want it to turn into my GUID, not a system GUID. And here I've got the signatures that are required in order to say, yes, you can parse and turn it into this thing. I could turn this into a foo, right? And say parse a string and turn it into a foo. Now, this also introduces another interesting feature that's part of C# 11 that is hidden a little bit underneath the scenes. You might find use for this, and that is static methods, static method declarations on your interfaces. You can also do abstract static as well inside of your base classes, but we can specify, we can require now that our interface can specify a static method that we're requiring our classes to implement. Let's do that again. So if we say public interface, I don't know. Let's make this shuffleable, right? Maybe it's like a collection here that we want you to be able to shuffle, and it's shuffleable. I can randomly, right, organize that like a group of cards or something that you want to shuffle. Maybe you're doing a uh, a raffle. We need to shuffle those entries inside of it. So I can specify here, right, a static void method called shuffle that takes an enumerable of shuffleable objects. And now I've specified here, go do this. Abstract. There it goes. So now I'm forcing it to implement and say, here's the thing that we need to go and implement inside of my class. Very cool stuff. And we can take a look at the iParsable. And it shows you here, here's the syntax that is being used for numerics to be able to enforce and say static abstract of some type. You need to be able to parse this and turn it into whatever that type is we're attached to. Very cool stuff. And it's interesting that it's self-referencing here. Look at that, right? So the generic type itself must be iParsable. Very interesting stuff. So, the next bit that I have here is showing a little bit more about those generic math interactions. So now I can provide and say something behaves like a number, and we can sum those values. That could be weird. We can create our own pseudo-numeric types and define, well, here's how we sum those things, or here's how we do the average of these things, but I'm specifying my own numeric type. This is extremely valuable for folks that are doing some more interesting numeric operations, right? You're thinking about folks that are writing functions, that are writing machine learning algorithms, that are writing prediction capabilities, folks that are building games to be able to control what types of numbers you're working with and be able to specify those and interact with those. Very cool stuff. I also look at this and think I can create my own strongly typed numbers and be able to interact with those, right? Let's go off script here for a second. I could create my own class called let's call it I don't know, an order ID, and I could say that's a number, right? Like that, right? And now I have to implement the interface. Sure. And now I have all the capabilities that I need to define for what an order ID is. Now, I could define these in an abstract class, right? So that I have this strongly typed numeric that is an order ID. Very cool stuff. So, yes, I haven't implemented all the types. Thank you so much. So that starts to get interesting for me to be able to define strongly typed numeric IDs that allow me then to pass values around without colliding, right? I could say, well, this is an order ID. Yes, it's a long for being saved back to the database, but I can strongly reference it as an order ID type. That becomes interesting. List patterns I mentioned. So let's take a look at this. We've done pattern matching in the past, and we end up with pattern matching in things like this: a switch statement, right? Switch expression, I'm sorry, that inspects and says, well, if it matches a signature, yield return this value. So we're going to take a look at this collection of values being passed in, this array of values passed in, and if it matches this, then return that value. So I'm using the range operator here so that I could say, match 0 to many entries between 2 and 10. So if the collection passed in starts with 1 and 2, 0 to some number of other entries, and ends with 10, return the value 1. So in my test scenario, if I pass 1, 2, 10, it returns 1. If I pass 1, 2, 7, 3, 3, it'll return 1. But if I pass just 1 and 2, well, that doesn't match. I'm sorry. If I pass just 1 and 2, well, that doesn't match this one because it doesn't end with 10, but it does match this, and we'll get 2. Now, 1 and 3 doesn't match either of these, but I run into this interesting scenario coming down here where I can use a discard and write the underscore, and it'll say, I don't care about the rest of these values, but I don't care about what the second value is, but there's only going to be a second value. Return 3, and it'll print 3. So I can go on here. When I have 1, 3, and then 5, well, it doesn't, that's 3 values, so it's not going to stop there. It's going to go through to this, and we'll get 4. And down here, we're we're doing effectively the catch-all, and you need either this catch-all array at the end, or you need the discard at the end, otherwise it won't compile. But using the catch-all here, even though this starts with 2, it doesn't match any of those previous ones, it'll catch here and output 50. So we're matching a collection based on the contents of it and looking for items in specific positions. And we're looking specifically at an integer collection here. Now, if you were looking at some other more complex types, it gets much more interesting. Curious. Personally, I'm only looking at this for numeric types when I do need to do some sort of a match against a collection of, and looking for numbers in specific positions here. So really cool stuff to see that introduced. And now let's talk about those raw string literals. And once again, I'm amazed at how much folks are really interested in this because but I understand it simplifies some struggles that we as .NET developers have had forever, and it feels like almost Stockholm syndrome we've been dealing with. So if we typically start with 3 quotes on a single line, you could put these all on one line. You could. So by doing it this way, I can put carriage returns inside of here and it ignores them. Typically ending with 3 quotes on a single line. Any new lines following the opening and preceding ending are ignored, and white space to the left of the ending quotes are ignored as well. So let's just do a console write line of that long message there real quick. Yeah. So I'm just going to run this. I'm going to move you over here and change this. Yep. Oh, I can't move the I can't move. Yeah. Can I turn off? I have fancy zones turned on here. So let me change this now, C#11. So now if I run this, the long message that it'll write out with the carriage returns in it, see how it got rid of. Let's put these side by side. So it ignored the top quote, the top, I'm sorry, carriage return, and it ignored the bottom carriage return as well. All of the space to the left of the end quotes is ignored. So if I go back in here and if I add a tab there, right? See how it's giving me the here? Line doesn't start with the same white space as the closing string. So if I go and bring that back one, now you see it observes that everything's tabbed in one, right? Because it expects with that, and it's nice having the guide rulers here. It expects that everything's going to line up here. If I bring that over, it expects everything's going to line up here. And if I take it over, well, it's broken, and I get the red line. Sorry, you can't put it there. So if I do want the things tabbed over, bring it all the way across. By putting it there, it eliminates it, ignores that stuff, and you still get the nice formatting that we enjoy here inside of Visual Studio. Um, Embedding XML ends up looking really nice. So with all the tabs, with the content being output appropriately here. Now if we run it, it looks and feels like XML. Now, okay, that's XML. You could do this with HTML also. But embedded XML, right, that was that old VB feature that felt kind of weird we didn't have in C#. We're closer to it. It's still a string, but you've embedded it, you can work with it, and it looks the right way, obeying all of those tabs. Finally, if you have to use curly braces, you can indicate how many by using $signs. So if you want to indicate that there's multiple curly braces that we want to use $2 and it requires, you could see here my curly braces are in white, that it's using to identify string interpolation. Pivot over to C# and grab that double for longitude and that double for latitude. If I take that off, now it's going to put an extra curly brace there around them. And this is actually going to get a little wonky because it's saying, oh, I don't know what this other thing is. So get rid of that. And it's still looking at this and saying, well, you're putting an extra one here and I don't know what that is. So by doing $signs, I can say, put an extra curly brace around this. And you see it there in the orange. I guess it's orange. And interpolate with that. So now I get the nice formatting that I want. No. Where I have a curly brace around it. Right, because if I was doing this with regular string interpolation, I would have to escape that. Right? I'd end up doing I forget what it is to get it escaped. $sign does it now. And to me, that's one of the biggest features is being able to now escape the curly braces. Not just that it looks nice and it's easier to read, but being able to do the indicator of how many curly braces are needed to trigger interpolation. If I put 3, I put the dollar on the wrong one. Put it right there. Now it's kind of confused. Well, wait a sec. I'm not sure what to do with all of this. So put an extra one on these. Right, and then I can put an extra one on the outside. And now I'll end up with 2 curly braces on the outside, and this will be turned into the longitude, and this will be turned into the latitude. And it becomes up to you. How many of these things do you want? Not bad. Um, makes things more readable, but gives you better control over what's being interpreted and painted on screen. So, how we doing there, chat? No questions so far. All right, we'll keep it that way. Keep it that way, chat room. I like it. So, let's head back over to the slides. All right. We've done a lot of work for the modern web and APIs. We updated the runtime so that we have HTTP 3 support, faster HTTP 2 upload support, ARM64 support for Kestrel and IIS. That shouldn't be ARMS. That should be ARM. I typed it wrong. Um, Kestrel performance improvements on higher core machines. We updated our APIs for authentication improvements with JOTS, rate limiting and output caching support, gRPC JSON transcoding. There's different things to make minimal APIs much easier to work with and customize, so you can write just a little bit of code and end up with some very complex APIs. And we've updated web UI capabilities so you get custom elements for Blazor. We've added data binding in Blazor for get, set, and after modifiers, so we can specify how you want to data bind various attributes. And we're introducing an experimental, what we call the quick grid component. Let's take a look. Let's head over to some of the web updates. Let's talk about those over in Visual Studio. I think I put it. Is it this one? No, it's back over here. That's where I put it. So, nope, don't save that one. So let's talk about, this is the web API that you get by default when you say file new web API and you tell it, go ahead and build with top level programs. Just like before, we get a builder. I turned on authentication and it's giving me, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do this live. Sure, remove that. Let's do this live. Add a new project, and I'm going to add an API project. And let's call this my web API this time. So .NET 7, I'm going to turn on authentication. I could have it register with Windows, but also now with the identity platform. Give me the minimal APIs. Let's show that one. And turn on Open API support. It's going to give me the new MS Identity tool that's being used to manage our interactions with identity. I have out here on the Microsoft Identity platform, so using my Azure Active Directory, I have a bunch of apps already configured. I'm going to use sample web API here. I could choose to add Microsoft Graph permissions, add permissions to some other API that might already be defined. I'm not going to do any of that. Let it go through, and it's going to connect and grant access to this application for folks that are logged in with Active Directory. So let's head over here. Now, if we take a look at our program, it's a little bit more complex. We have authentication added, and it's going right away and saying, go connect to Azure AD, and I've got some information written into my configuration about how to connect to Azure AD. We're going to set up Swagger here. We're going to set up OpenAPI, build, configure OpenAPI user interface. We're going to set up HTTPS redirection. There's our authentication and authorization. And here is the OpenAPI definition. I'm sorry. Excuse me. This is the API definition as a single line. Map get. Okay, it's not a single line. All right, fine. It's 16 lines of code, but I've got everything that I need for it all right here. So if you've already got a NuGet package out there that has all the methods defined that you want to expose as an API, to be able to map this up and say, well, map get to this address / weather forecast, and here's the method to call, go execute this method inside this object. That's pretty cool. I've also got some helper methods down here with name get weather forecast. Set this up as an open API and it requires authorization. You must be authorized in order to access this. Let's start this and take a look at it. So notice it goes right to Swagger, okay? And if I go click through, I can inspect and see, well, here's all the data that's going to be coming back. I get a date that's composed of these data points and this structure, right, defined in that schema. We're used to that. So if I try to execute this, now I'm not authenticated. I'm not logged in. I'm not authenticated to this object. So now there are ways to add authentication to this page. And I'm going to leave that for the folks to show you next week about how to add authentication to this. There is, it's basically set up inside here. Where is it? It's OAuth client, not the secrets there. There's a method in here that you can configure that will get it for you. OAuth client ID, and you can set up the OAuth scopes for how folks are allowed to connect and interact with Swagger user interface. Otherwise, you need to set up a login page, you need to set up all that stuff so that folks can then go and interact with your API. So if I get rid of the require authorization here, run this one more time. So my web API weather forecast, try that out, execute. Oh, look at that. I forgot to remove that piece. Son of a gun. Stop that. Why don't I have a, there it is. Get rid of that. So verify that user has this scope. I'm not checking to see if you're logged in. I'm not requiring it. So do that again. And there's my weather result. And of course, I can navigate right to that as well, right? And I get the same results. Fine. But what I want you to see is, yes, you're getting the same results. We're writing less code. We're verifying and ensuring with these new authorization capabilities that folks are logged in and they have the appropriate access to get here. Now that scope required by API is defined. I don't see it. Where did that come from? Ah, there it is. There it was. So look in the configuration file for some definition of scopes, and that's what we're going to require somebody to have access to in order to be able to interact with this API. Really easy to interact with and define those interactions for authorization and authentication with minimal APIs. But this isn't all that we've done. We've also simplified the ability to build and launch this. This is right. Look at this. This is 60 some lines of code. We can get even simpler doing this. And I've already actually opened this up and built this out even further. Now let's make this the simplest API. Hang on, do this again. Let's make this even easier. Add new project, and I'm going to create another API. Yup. Let's call this smallest API. Yep. I don't want to use controllers. Turn off open API support. Create that, and we can make this really small. I don't even want to put. The weather forecast stuff is fine, but there's other things we can do here. If we're not adding services to the container, if we're using the container just the way it is, and we're not using some of those capabilities, I can actually say just create. I can get rid of this, right? Because it just makes the application. It says, well, here, take all of the defaults that we like. If I didn't have HTTPS redirection, get rid of that. And now I've got, right here, now we're down at 26 lines of code. I could make this even shorter if I wanted to by pushing some of these things out, but just having that map get and that interaction, I could start that up, and there's my weather forecast again, going to the right location. No open API needed, and it just works. It runs really, really fast, 10 times faster than Node, and you're going to be able to put it into a container real easy. And I think that's a lot of what we talk about when folks say cloud native and building things that are optimized for the cloud, things that are small, not a lot of code, take advantage of cloud platforms and deploy very easily. So we're pretty happy with where this is going. But that's not all. We've also been introducing features for Blazor. We've been introducing features to make it easier to build and define things. And I want to go over, I have source code here for what we call the quick grid. And you might have a tool, you might have a grid from someone else out there, that some vendor or even some open source repository that builds grids for you easily. No, let's go to this one. We've been tinkering about building a grid, our Steve Sanderson, and we have a quick grid component that we're defining here. It's not intended to be the end all be all, but it's going to be something simple because everybody asks for a grid. So what if we can have a grid and we can define some of those common features that folks want? Here's a collection of items that we want you to present. Let's define, we're going to have resizable columns. Let's set up pagination with a paginator down here with some pagination state. So here's how many items per page we're going to have. And bind columns to those properties of the object. So filter items, you could see here, is an iQueryable of type country. So this is particularly showing a demo of countries and their medal count results from the recent Olympics. So looking down here, I'm setting a title to put at the top of the column, sort algorithm to put here. What are we sorting on when you click on this column? How do you want the content aligned? And we're putting an image in here, and it's going to be a flag in SVG format. We're going to bind columns to various properties here, and we're specifying, well, what's the name of that property? This case, name. But it's the type of thing that we're used to seeing. Specify some column options here, including a search capability that we'll put across the top. But here, we're not putting any of those properties, and we're just defining columns. Let me show you what this looks like, because it's just another grid. I've already bought the DevExpress grid. I don't need your grid, Microsoft. What are you doing here? Well, we're trying to define a minimum that folks can get by default when you use the Microsoft tools. And you see I get that grid of content, and I have a pagination element down here. So it looks good. It feels right. It feels like what we want here. And there's lots more coming. This is an experiment that we're building, we're starting on. There's different ways that you can interact. You can use a provider model. So we have a items provider that's defining. So in a method here, here's how to go get the content that we want to present inside the grid. So for this request that's being passed in, pass along the information about sort and apply that appropriately over here. So easy to see. And we've also added virtualization here, so you can specify that the grid will be virtualized. Virtualize equals true. There is no pagination. And now I get this sorted by name, and I could scroll way down here, and it'll load up and present that content. The sort works great. So, but the search capability is only over here for this in memory. So if I want to search for, let's search for Jamaica. There it is. It brings it back and shows it. This is all being rendered server side and presented to us. If I go back, I can do this in WebAssembly also. And it'll download and run everything now in my browser. And this is just paging in the browser. And if I do the search, that's all happening browser side, and it's all working inside my browser. Cool. Very cool. So lots of flexibility with the quick grid, the capabilities that are coming that you can check out and interact with as you're building your next Blazor application. You have a grid that you can try out and use that hopefully makes your applications look good. So there's documentation for how to use this, as well as how to extend it. That's going to be available on Microsoft Learn as we release the initial preview here next week. All right, let me head back over to slides. Performance of our APIs has significantly improved. I mentioned it's more than 10 times faster. It's actually 11 times faster than Node.js. Okay. 7.02 million according to the Tech Empower benchmarks. Why wouldn't you? You get to write the same amount of code or less code to use a .NET API versus a Node API. Java Servlet still comes in at 2.2 million to write an API. You're still, it's 3 times faster to use .NET. So we think that's kind of important. And it's even faster to access your data using Entity Framework Core. So the time to insert multiple rows is now significantly faster, 74% faster using the new Save Changes Async method. Actually, that's not new, but using the new capabilities we've added to it. Okay. We support mapping to JSON columns. So if you have JSON stored in a column, you want to turn that back into a strongly typed object, you can do that. The bulk updates significantly faster. We have given the ability to define custom reverse engineering templates. So if you want to make templates for how you want your code generated, your SQL statements generated from your database, you can control that now. Interceptors, events for how you intercept and interact with the database. You want to intercept a command that's running a query against the database. You can do that. And events coming out. Hey, something happened in the database that we need to go and take a look at. You can take a look. There's new ways to interact with that. We've also got stored procedure mappings. This was one that I was looking forward to. Stored procedure mappings for insert, update, and delete operations. So when you're inserting records, when you're updating records, and if you're using stored procedures in your database, you can define how to call that stored procedure instead of being forced to go through Entity Framework generating insert, update, and delete statements for you. Pass it off to a stored procedure. Maybe you have some sort of logging operation that's happening when you run a delete or an update operation. You can do that now with the new capabilities of Entity Framework. So taking a look at chat, not everything's quiet. No questions over there. I'm at the end of what I had for us here tonight. I want to answer your questions. I want to make sure that you know to check out .NET Conf 2022 next week. And I thought I had a resource slide at the end. I didn't. So that's where I'm through talking about demos, talking about content. What do you want to know? What's interesting to you about .NET 7? What are you looking forward to that we can make sure we talk about? We can make sure we write blog posts about. We've been doing a lot of prep to make sure that particularly performance is a big value that you see out of this. There's big performance updates for .NET MAUI to make that better in .NET 7. I showed you the API numbers of how we're hitting 7 million requests. I think it's request per minute is that. Um, so really good stuff that we're looking forward to getting in your hands, because it means that you're going to be able to run less instances of ASP.NET Core web servers and get the same amount of throughput. That's important. So what do you think, chat? What else is going on out there? Let me know. What questions do you have about .NET 7? What are you looking forward to? What can I answer? What questions can I answer for you about what's happening, what's coming, what's going for .NET 8? Let me know there in chat.
I have a
Seems like
question. We have some .NET 6 APIs that we created relatively recently. So with 7 coming out, do you recommend like upgrading to 7, as soon as you can, or would that be better off? I mean, waiting till 8 for the next LTS. I mean, this is an enterprise app we're talking about, but so I was curious.
So I would hedge that on the maybe, right? Of course, the maybe being it's an enterprise app. How is your continuous integration system? Is it built so that you are doing some unit testing as things are being compiled and deployed? Are you even doing automated deployment? That's going to control whether or not I would recommend that. Because if you are doing automated deployment, I would take your time enabling and getting that in the mix just to make sure that everything still works the way that you expect it to. It should, but just make sure and have that check. Because when we go from .NET 7 to .NET 8, our bar for backwards compatibility is very, very high. We want to make sure that we don't break backwards compatibility. So if you do have a strong continuous integration system in there, why not? It's all of the code that you've written for .NET 6 works exactly the same in .NET 7. You can change here. Heck, let me share my screen again here and bring up my screen is still shared. Oh goody. Let me go back over to here. If I change my code, let's start a new .NET 6 app. No, wrong one. My bad. Add new project, and let's start a new API. .NET Fix? No, .NET 6. Instead of .NET 7, if I take it to .NET 6, sure, go ahead, use controllers and let it create that. I end up getting the weather forecast controller. We're used to seeing this thing. But take this over to .NET 6, run that. While it doesn't have the Open API capabilities built in, there's .NET 6 doing its thing. It should be as easy as going in here and changing this like that. Save, run, and it still works. That's what it should be. You probably have a series of NuGet packages down here that you're going to want to patch and update to their latest versions. That's okay. You should be able to use the NuGet UI. Where is it? Tools, NuGet Package Manager. Sure. You should be able to come in here and go grab these and say, yes, go get all those and give me the latest version. And it should work for you. So would I tell you to go and absolutely upgrade? If you have the stomach to do the upgrade again in a year to get to .NET 8, go for it. And I would suggest that you probably do have the capacity for that if you have a good continuous integration system. But it's up to you to decide if you're okay with doing that on the fly update. So I know a lot of folks with enterprise systems and a lot of moving pieces that are looking at that and saying there's too many parts to upgrade all at once now. And that's okay. Take a look, test, get the feel for the things that you're going to be able to take advantage of. with .NET 8 when you upgrade to the LTS.NET 8 next year. I did miss, you know what I didn't do? I didn't touch on, going back into that demo, I noticed I forgot to talk about this one. There's a new feature here to allow you to map groups of minimal APIs. So I can specify, map all these APIs under /to-dos. I can apply tags to those and say, well, light these all up with OpenAPI and specify, well, here's the map commands for these. So, and I've got them mapped to methods, and I just stubbed these out down here. Just it doesn't matter to me. I could add a list of these for it to interact with, but for now, whatever, they're just right there. But by using this map group, now I can say, well, take that to-dos group and map /some ID. So that would be /to-dos /some ID to call get to-do, and it knows that there's an ID it's passing through. So we need to receive that ID. And get all to-dos is a method that's not receiving an ID. So when we run a get on the root of to-dos, because it's hanging off of to-dos, it's going to return that. So let me run this one, and you'll see what this looks like. So here are those tags that I defined. To-dos, some other tag, get all to-dos. To-dos, some other tag, and this one is get all to-dos. So they're organized here. Those tags help organize things on this page. And I have minimal API down here. That's just the name of the project. So it organized that whole thing, and that's this one here. So all it's doing is providing some grouping level that makes sense in this user interface. It didn't duplicate them and put them other places. So notice the create a to-do little bit of documentation that appears there. And that is from the operation summary here. So I'm specifying additional information that we can include in the user interface to train folks so they know how to use and provide that extra bit of documentation for our user interface. So I can actually go up here to this one, right? And I believe I can I do just with tags on this? Yeah, with tags. And I can specify Fritz's API, right? Save that. That should hot reload. Nope, didn't patch it. Ah, that's browser link. I get the two spinning circle icons backwards. So there it is, Fritz's API, and that one is so amazing that it just returns hello world. All in the name of giving you more flexibility, more capabilities here in how you document and make your APIs available as Swagger. And of course, the JSON format has all of that information. You can see the tags so that folks can discover and build their own either clients or API or generate documentation out of this. It's all included for you. All right. Let me stop sharing. There we go. Let's see in chat. Hey, Chris Elder writes, newer to .NET Core, most examples online use Entity Framework for data access. Yeah, we're touting our own API there, sure. What's the thinking on using stored procedures with .NET Core versus Entity Framework? So one of the new features here for Entity Framework Core is you can use stored procedures with Entity Framework Core to deliver those insert, update, and delete interactions. This means that you can do those interactions. You can build and work with them. Let me see if I can find that doc real quick. Right, it's going to be somewhere like right? Entity framework 7 stored procedure. Wanted to find this doc and get it linked in here. I don't think that's it. Sample model, where is it? Maybe that's stored procedure mapping. Yeah. So insert using stored procedure, and then you specify the name of the stored procedure, and you specify, well, here's how we use that insert stored procedure. Similarly here for the update, here are the parameters that you need in order to execute and use these stored procedures. So there's the stored procedures defined. So when you insert, update, and delete from your collection, from your person collection, it will execute these stored procedures appropriately. So what's the thinking on that? It used to be with Entity Framework Core, go use the default insert, update, and delete statements that are generated. You have that flexibility now if you want to do. And did they add some sort of no, they don't do it here. If you wanted to add some logging, you wanted to add some other checking, some other interaction you wanted behind the scenes done in that stored procedure, do that. Otherwise, when you're doing just a straight insert or a straight update, just take the default capabilities. Implications for performance? Not anymore. No, it should support that and handle that quite nicely. So very cool. Any other questions? I see Nelly off mute. I don't know if that's intentional or.
Seems like all's quiet in the chat land.
Yeah, okay.
So what can we expect in .NET Conf?
So .NET Conf, there is 80 sessions. We've got 9 hours day 1, 9 hours day 2, but day 2, it ends at 5 o'clock, but we continue for 24 hours straight. So folks outside of our time zones here in the States who don't want to stay up till midnight watching .NET Conf, they're also going to get content in their time zone. If you're a late night owl, stay up, hang out with us, watch some of that content. And it goes 24 hours straight on day 3. I love that because it means we've got content being presented from 6 of the 7 continents. Sorry, Antarctica. And really great content from folks everywhere with different insights to how they use .NET. And we've also grouped our sessions for day 1 and day 2. So let me explain what I mean by that. Maybe you're really into Blazor. Maybe you're really into maybe you're into building mobile apps. There's a group of 4 sessions around those technologies that you can tune into and just stick around for 2 hours. You don't have to go and say, well, I'll come back 2.5 hours later when the next web session is on. We've got it all right next to each other so that you can tell the boss, hey, I'm going to take 2 hours here, learn something. We'll be back afterwards, and I'll be done for the rest of .NET Conf because I've seen all the web content. That's pretty cool. So we've got what we're calling the State of the Technology mini keynotes that happen at the beginning of each of those groups. So there's a State of the Web, State of Blazor, State of .NET MAUI session that's going to give you that high-level review of here's all the things, and then we'll go deep on some of them. We're also including a handful of advanced topics, including folks from our C# team, not only showing you some of the new features that I went over tonight, but they're going to design and talk about designing a new feature live during the event. So if you've wondered, well, where the heck do these things come from? Who decides and makes up raw string literals? How does that get approved? How does that turn into a language feature that 3 years from now we're going to be using all the time and not even think about? How does that thing get developed? they're going to talk through and in a half an hour session show you how that process happens. Really cool stuff. We've got some announcements about containers that we can't wait to share with you, um, and a bunch more happening. Some special guests that are going to appear, and we're going to have a hookup with GitHub Universe Day 2, so you can see a little bit of what's going on at GitHub Universe while you're watching .NET Conf. We're really excited about the event. We've been planning since July, and Sam, you've seen what goes into some of these events. it's it's a lot. Where I'm more nervous than I've been in years past for some of these, and excited all at the same time. Um, and then I was told that they're getting 2 to 4 feet of snow in Washington State during .NET Conf. Like, oh no, this is a problem. So we'll see.
Well, I mean,
So
you're going to have a lot of speakers speaking remotely, and then those that are not are going to be in the Microsoft Studio. So it's,
it's making sure they get to the studio that's going to be the fun part.
yeah, very true.
We ran
I
into
was just,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
We ran an event several years ago, just before pandemic. We ran our first .NET Focus event on Blazor, and it snowed a good 6 inches of snow. And I made sure when I landed in town for the event, I rented an SUV with all-wheel drive and all the snow gear, and I ended up driving around 6 a.m. in the morning, the day of our .NET Conf event, picking up the camera folks and production folks, and getting them into the studio. So hope we don't have to do that this time, but we'll have some fun.
Yeah, Mother Nature always throws that curveball, so
Oh,
that's
doesn't it?
expected. I was actually
I,
flipping through the schedule, and it seems like you have a lot of speakers and a lot of very interesting topics. Am I right in saying that all this will be uploaded to YouTube?
yes, all of .NET Conf will be available on YouTube. There's actually a playlist out there already. And Sam, we don't just have those sessions. We've actually got some pre-record sessions that some folks that submitted and didn't make the cut. Um, we offered them a chance to pre-record. Those will be published live day of, and we're actually going to air them as premieres the first day. So if you stick around at the end of the day, they'll be aired as a premiere on YouTube that evening. So
Sounds great.
I see Dave has a question here in chat. Do you mind if I take it real quick?
Please go ahead.
So Dave asks, will C# 11 be available when using .NET 7 or greater? Yes. So there are changes that are made to the runtime, to the base class library, in order to support those C# 11 features. The generic math capabilities. There's new interfaces that are defined. There's new capabilities that are defined. Those abstract structs. Abstract static methods that are now being able to hang on interfaces. Those capabilities, they all needed to be added to the programming language and to the runtime in order to get there. So you won't be able to use C# 11 and target an older version of .NET. So it comes with .NET 7. Same thing that happened with C# 10. We're gonna see the language version snap to a version of .NET, and going forward, you're going to need to use either an older version of C# with that version of .NET, or the current version of C#. You won't be able to go the other way and use a newer version of C# with an older version of .NET. I think I just confused the heck out of myself on that. So
I think we get the gist.
yeah, there we go. Right, there's a difference of 4 if I don't know. I'm trying to put a algorithm to it was 6 and 10 .NET 6 and 10. So yeah, I don't know. It needs to be at least a difference of 4 versions between the two. So you can use C# 11. No, that doesn't work. A minimum of 4 versions. No? A maximum of 4 versions? I don't know. We'll figure that out. So,
All in due time.
yeah.
Anyone else have any questions or comments for Jeff?
Cool.
Still quiet in chat land. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I just have a couple wrap-up announcements. And first off, let me post a few links in chat. And then let me share my screen as well. All right. So thanks again to Jeff for taking the time to present. I know you're under the gun with .NET Conf, but highly appreciate you taking the effort to present. As for the links that I posted in chat, there's the link to the YouTube channel, and the recording of the presentation will be edited and uploaded. But as promised, it will be done after .NET Conf, so it will be on November 11th. And please subscribe to the channel to get upload notifications. In addition, tech events, which we'll cover in just a little bit, will be posted on my blog, samnasser.blogspot.com. And also you can subscribe to that as well. And last but not least, the feedback eval. The link is posted in the chat window, so feel free to fill that out so we can provide some constructive criticism back to Mr. Frtiz. Also, if you joined us past the start of the meeting, Manning has a special offer for us, 35% off a selection of books. The discount code is MTPCLEC21, and the link you see at the bottom of the slide is also provided in the chat window. And so that brings us to our upcoming events for the month of November. So on November 9th, which is the second Wednesday, is the Azure Cleveland User Group, and we're going to be talking about bridging the gap between Azure and SignalR, and that's going to be happening on Wednesday the 9th. Also the same day, later in the evening, is one of my favorite groups, the .NET Study Group, which I've been heading up. And if you're interested in learning about Azure fundamentals, feel free to sign up for that. All meetings that you see here are free of charge, and invite you to attend. On November 17th, which is the third Thursday of the month, is the Great Lakes Users Group, and the meeting information, again, is also posted on Meetup. And then November 21st, which is a Monday, typically we meet every fourth Thursday, but being that November has Thanksgiving, we definitely don't want to conflict with family time. So our November meeting will be moved to Monday, November 21st, and the topic will be listed on the Meetup site as well. So that wraps it up for user groups. As far as conferences, November 8th through the 11th is Tech Bash, happening over in the Pennsylvania Poconos. That's an in-person event. And as you might have heard earlier, November 8th through the 10th, .NET Conf. The URL for that is .NETconf.net. And then November 9th through the 10th is GitHub Universe. And Jeff, you said that on one day you're going to be linking with GitHub. Is that on the 9th or the 10th?
That's going to be on the 9th. So we're going to connect with them and talk to folks from GitHub Universe on .NET Conf. And GitHub Universe is going to air content from .NET Conf as well.
Okay. Very good. All right. Another thing that we always like to do at the end of the meeting is discuss job openings. So TechSystems always has job openings posted at techsystems.com/IT-jobs, but always like to ask, who's hiring? And you can make yourself known either in chat verbally or entered into the chat window. And also like to ask, who's looking? So anyone know if anyone's hiring or is anyone looking? And it looks like it's still all quiet in chat land. All right. Last but not least, my contact information. If you have any questions, my email is snasser@nistechnologies.com. You can also find me on Twitter @samnasser. And my blog, as mentioned earlier, samnasser.blogspot.com. And I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. So with that, thanks again to Jeff, and thanks to all of you for attending. And we'll see you all at .NET Conf. And have a good night, everyone.